listening. The first sort of impression of the media I have in my mind, my first memory of the media is listening to the radio. In Calcutta, my parents had a very old-fashioned, heavy radiogram, his master's voice radiogram. And I can remember the news coming crackling over the short wave. I remember when I got back to India, to Britain, some of the programs. There was a wonderful detective program called Dick Barton's Special Agent. And there were brilliant comedies, which if any of you can find them on WhatsApp or YouTube or something like that, you would realize the impression that they left. Programs like Itmar or Muchbinding in the Marsh. So radio was there with me for my youngest days, and of course radio has changed. Has remained with me. When I look back on my life, I realize that I have seen the most incredible changes in my lifetime. And I sometimes think that my generation has seen more change than any previous generation. I have to say the speed at which things are changing now might, in another 80 years, someone standing like me might be able to say they've seen far more rapid change. But you know, if you look back to when I was born when India was still part of the British Empire, the jewel in the imperial crown. I lived for 9 years. So in some ways I call myself a relic of the British Raj. When I went to school, we were sent away to school for 9 months in Darjeeling, and when we went off to school, those were days when railways were still dominant. No one thought of going anywhere in any other way. So I went to Darjeeling. It took a day and a half, no, 2 days, well, a night and a day to get there. My father was director of the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway, and so I would boast about this on the Darjeeling train, which took an incredibly long time to reach Darjeeling. At the same time, at school, we went around the place with our covered in ink, because there was the only way you could write was with a pen that you dipped in an inkwell. There were not even any barrows, any ballpoints in those days. Then again, of course, the communications were totally different. In the Calcutta of my father, there was a tradition that you stopped work on Friday lunchtime because Friday afternoon the mail boat left, and therefore you couldn't send any more mail back to London or receive any more mail from London, so you could have a big lunch and go home and sleep it off. And of course, those were the days of letters. Now, in all these things, including the method that we used to come and go from India by liners, in all these things, there were merits, and things have been lost in them, as well as gains. If you look, for instance, at the question of mail and writing, there is no doubt about it that because we find it so easy to communicate now, there is far too much communication. In the old days, if you were in Calcutta and your head office was in London, you had to take decisions because you didn't have the time to consult with London a lot of the time. Nowadays, because of all this communication which is going on, there is far too much consultation, I think, very often. takes place, and things, instead of being simplified, become intensely complicated. So that's just one example. Another example is the liners. I can still remember the names of 3 liners which I travelled on when my parents went back to England for leaves. One was called the Viceroy of India, one the Strathmore. They were both P&O boats, and one was the British India boat, the Madrasa, the Masala, not the Masala, the Masila. And I can remember the pleasure of those voyages, and still you can see what we've lost by the decline of sea transport in the pleasure people take in cruising. If it wasn't that travelling by sea is a wonderful experience, why would it be that people are cruising so much, the cruising industry is going so much? So you have these examples. They're not very forceful examples, but I think they make a very important point, that in all progress, things are lost as well, and in all progress, there are things which go wrong, things which are created too excessively, damage is caused, environmental damage is caused, whatever it might be. Let us just take the example of what has happened because of the increasing availability of air travel and the increasing ease of road travel. There came a stage as a result of this when people were saying we don't want railways. Railways are old-fashioned, railroads are outmoded. But if you look at it from an environmental point of view, if you look at it from also a pleasure in travel and convenience in travel, railways have proved to them to be, by modernizing themselves, it has been shown that railways are, in many cases, the best way of travel. And there's no doubt about it that railways are the best way of carrying large loads, be it coal, but be it what else it is. And also, nowadays, people in this country are so obsessed by air that they will fly to Dehradun or something like that. If you calculate, if you do the calculation, actually you get there quicker if you go by Shatabdi. You won't have that hideous, and I say hideous, airport experience. You won't have to queue 7 times before you get on the train, and you will have all the training time of sitting in the train. You're there in one place, and you can read a book, you can work on your computer, you can do whatever you want. So the time on the train is not wasted. The time on the aeroplane is almost totally wasted. Yet people are so seduced by the concept of progress and the concept that this is the modern way to go, that they will do something like fly to Dehradun. And I remember in Britain, we were so convinced that railways were out that we had a report commissioned by a man called Dr. Beeching. And his report was so savage that he suggested there should be no trains over the English border. So no trains should go from London to Scotland, for instance. Well, thank heavens, we were saved from that. And now, because we have realized the damage which was done by cutting our railways back, because we realize that, we are now reopening lines which the dreaded Dr. Beeching closed. So, in all these things, a point I'm trying to make is things which appear to be modern, things which appear to be wonderful in every respect, have their disadvantages. And if I could just go back one more time to railways, we all now realize that the motor car has very, very minus qualities, if I can use that phrase, as well as, of course, usefulness. And we've just been talking, before I came here with your colleagues, we were talking about the plan to build a good suburban railway service. And the metro has shown what railways can do for you. Now, I'm saying all this because I want to speak about radio in this context. Because when television came along, and I still remember the days, of course, when there was no television. I remember the 50s when I first saw black and white television, and the days I was talking to you about when I loved radio and radio was dominant. But then along came television. And I was, interestingly, I was a BBC radio correspondent, primarily. I did television from time to time, but reluctantly, and I was a BBC radio correspondent. But of course, the television correspondence, because it was the medium of the moment, they thought, used to rather look down on us radio people. But I would argue that we radio people were actually doing